Welcome to One Patriots Place with Thomas, Murph Murphy, and Claire, Clazzy Clare Cooper, all brought to you by the E2G Sports Network and E2Gsports.com. If you are listening on podcast, thank you for downloading. Please do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Today, we welcome in our lovely guest, one of the smartest guys on the Patriots beat, the pretty face and the beautiful mind of Evan Nazar.
Wow.
Evan, welcome back to the show. How are things with you?
Wow, the looks too, man. Usually it's just the nerdy mind of Evan Lazar. Not too many people compliment the looks. I appreciate that.
Last time you were here, I complimented the beautiful mind, and you said, "See, Murph, she doesn't say anything about the face," and I was like, "I didn't mean it that way." So now I'm going to make a point.
Anything. Anything. I am battling a fever today. I'm not feeling well at all, and she's giving me grief because she's been sick 3 times in the past 4 weeks or whatever, and I haven't given her any sympathy, so I don't deserve any. So there you go.
Am I right, ladies? Am I right?
I've been called a typical man sitting there with the man flu. And one, Evan, tell me, are you going to take the lovely Garen with you to Indianapolis?
I wish. She has to stay home and work, but she has been with me to the combine before. We went right before COVID shut down the entire world. Jess and I went to Indy, and so she has come with me before. But unfortunately, this time she has to stay home and with Atlas and with work and everything like that. But yeah, she's been to Indy. It's not her favorite place. I wouldn't say it, to be honest with you. She wasn't too thrilled, but luckily I've elevated my hotel stay with the Patriots versus when I was on my own. So that's a little bit of a bonus. So hopefully,
it's not the Red Roof Inn. It's not the Red Roof Inn this time.
Yeah.
You're leaving the other half of Catch 22 in the studio, though, I hear. You aren't taking Alex with you. You're leaving him at home.
No, not this
cool.
time. I know. We took him with us to the Shrine Bowl, and that was a ton of fun. And Vegas, me and Alex in Vegas for a week of football, it doesn't really get much better than that for the two of us. So that was a ton of fun. Maybe next year. I told him that next year we're going to have to talk to the powers that be at Patriots.com to try to get him on the combine trip too. So maybe next year.
Maybe next year, man. That'd be great. That'd be great.
You
guys do such a fantastic job over there.
Thank you.
You know, you picked up right where you left off. They thought that they could break up the best 1-2 punch in New England sports, and they just couldn't do it. Evan, tell me what's the bonus for the guys that are headed down there, the coaching staff, that they had an opportunity to coach in the Shrine Bowl this year?
I think that honestly, just looking at it, even from my perspective, as somebody that's preparing for the draft, I have never felt more prepared going into a combine in terms of just the volume of players that I know about at this stage of the process versus what I normally would, just because okay, I get a pretty good feel of the top 50 to maybe top 75 guys by this point in the process. But now I got a great feel of some of the day 3 guys that they might be interested in as well, because we were out in Vegas. So I think that's where it's really going to benefit the Patriots, is those day 3 diamonds in the rough, maybe some guys that fit their system extremely well that they might not have known beforehand going into the Shrine Bowl, because they coached a dumbed down version of their system in Las Vegas. So maybe certain guys, especially I would say on the defensive side of the ball, maybe they discovered, okay, this is linebacker, he can play these different alignments, these different spots in our defense. He can play on the ball, off the ball, and they're a little bit more well-versed on how exactly this guy is going to translate into the Patriots scheme.
Did you find that the Shrine Bowl is kind of equaling out again with the Senior Bowl as far as talent that comes and participates?
It's getting closer and closer every single year. Last year, Taekwon was the highest pick from the Shrine Bowl at 50th overall. So we're getting up there in terms of top 50 prospects going. Zay Flowers was obviously at the Shrine Bowl this year, and he's going to be a top 50 guy, of course, in this year's draft. I think the one difference maybe at the Senior Bowl is that you have some more guys that could potentially slip into the first round at the Senior Bowl than maybe the Shrine Bowl. I think Zay is probably the only guy at the Shrine Bowl that has a real chance at round 1, whereas the Senior Bowl, there was maybe half a dozen to 10, 6 to 10, something like that, prospects that were at Mobile that I think have a chance to go at the end of the first round. So maybe that's the only little difference there. But I think overall, you had a really good talent pool at the Shrine Bowl. And like I mentioned, they're going to have – I did a mock draft already right after the Shrine Bowl and right after all of those festivities. And I think I hit like 4 guys on day 3 that they're probably going to draft or could draft, I should say. And that seems like a low number. Like I think half their draft class might end up coming from the Shrine Bowl.
Wow. That's huge. That's huge. Go ahead, Claire.
I've now started my draft preparation because, as you guys know, that I kind of don't do the college thing, but I've now started. To be honest with you, you know what the first thing actually my deep dive into the draft / combine thing was? It was Cap 22. I listened to Evan and Alex yesterday. I caught it up with this morning because I didn't get a chance to listen last week, and I found it fascinating when you got to go through each guy. And I'm glad that you kind of got the time to like pick one at each selection, because I know you guys could just sort of talk about one position sort of forever, but I found it so interesting and it just really whet my appetite. So I've gone on to PFF now. I've got my draft guide going. I try not to until after the combine because I don't get to see a lot of college. Yeah. So I kind of don't want to. The combine tends to be the first my first eyes on it particularly. But yeah, I've kind of dipped my toe in because of Catch 20. And because of that, I've come up with a load of questions for you, Evan. So
awesome.
When Murph was like, yeah, I might not do today's show, I was like, that's fine. Go. Okay, bye. Thanks. Yeah, no worries. See you later. I've got Evan for myself. I mean, I've got to give you a lot of grief.
I couldn't do that to you, bud. I couldn't do that to you.
Excuse me. I think I'll have you quoted here, Murph. I will quote Evan with the Claire voice is what did he say? What was the word that you used?
I wanted
endearing.
You won the contest.
I did.
On Patriots Unfiltered. I think you're getting a nice Patriots Unfiltered t-shirt that will probably be there a month from now because you're over on the other side of the pond. But you got a t-shirt, and Mike Deuce, as we call him, does a great Claire. Just nails the accent and everything, and it's fantastic. So whenever she comes up on the show, which is pretty frequently, Claire, you come up, I would say once a week, once every other week, something like that. And we always do the Claire voice, and everybody has a good time with it. But it's all out of love, of course.
To be fair, I've kind of got to give him his credit. Fred Kirsch did do it first. Deuce can't get the medal for that. It was actually a Fred thing when I very first started calling in, way before I even did any writing, did any podcasting. When I just rang in as a PU guest, as a PU fan, sorry. And Fred did it first, and I think that the best one was when I rang in and did Fred's impression of his impression of me. And that's probably the highlight of my career. That's it. I'm done. That was good. I'm done now. But anyway, yes, we're going off topic. With plenty of teams selecting before the Patriots in the draft, needing quarterbacks. With the tackle class being there was definitely some solid names that I've heard coming out of it. I mean, when the Patriots get to 14, there could be some serious decisions to be made in regards to talent that's there for the positions that's needed in such as tackle and cornerback. I mean, do they then really have to go from neither of position to just the best player and just take whoever, regardless, even though the tackle position, as we know as fans, and you guys in the media have said tackle is the top need, has it got to sort of shift away from that and just go for who is the best player there at number 14? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. My whole thing with what they do at 14 is best player available at a position of need, right? So let's combine both things here for a second. So I don't really care if it's a corner, if it's a tackle. we can get into wide receivers. I'm a little lukewarm on that idea for a couple of reasons, but I don't really care if it's one of those positions, whichever way they want to go. I just want the best player on the board out of those three positions: tackle, corner, wide receiver. Don't give me another guard. Don't give me a running back. All right. Don't give me a position you don't necessarily need, but go out there and get the best player available. And like you said, there's going to be a ton of options. It's going to be really interesting to see. And one of the bummers that I have about this combine schedule, it is what it is, but the tackles don't work out until Sunday. Right. So so we got to wait 6 days to see the tackles in Indianapolis. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but in general, I think what you're going to see is a guy like Broderick Jones from Georgia, who everybody likes. He's going to put on an absolute show in Indianapolis. That's his whole game, is that he's an absolute freak athlete and just a terrific blocker in space. So those types of guys, he has some technical refinement that he still has a little bit of a ways to go until he's a perfect prospect. Not that anybody's perfect, but I think that those types of guys in nowadays in the league with so much space and pace being played with on offense, he's a top 10 pick to me. I just don't really see how he gets out of the top 10. The guys I think you're looking at are really Paris Johnson and Skoronski as maybe people that could slip down a little bit. But like you said, there's some teams picking ahead, and some of those teams are going to want tackles. I think the Jets are going to probably be one of those big teams that's in on a tackle unless they're in on a quarterback. I think that the Raiders, same thing. If they're not in on a quarterback, then maybe it's tackle. I think there's a couple of teams like that. Corner is a really interesting one. This is one of the best cornerback classes that I've studied or evaluated for 3, 4, 5 years going now that I've been doing this. And it's not just necessarily yes, there's no Sauce Gardner. There's no guy in the top 5 that's just one of those home run picks, but there is probably 15 to 20 guys in the first 3 rounds that are all going to be NFL starters. All of those guys are going to play in the league. So that's going to be really interesting to see how different teams have their board stacked. Some teams are going to have Christian Gonzalez as the number 1 corner prospect. Some teams are going to have Devin Witherspoon from Illinois as the number 1 cornerback prospect. So how they stack that's going to be fascinating to me, but I think they're going to have a good option at 14. The last guy I would just mention before we get into some of the pass catchers, I'm sure eventually, Brian Branch from Alabama. He's a safety / corner, kind of one of those nickel hybrids. I think that that's going to be somebody that they're going to be really interested in, and where he plays in the back end, they'll figure it out once they get him in Foxborough.
The one thing that I found very interesting when you talked about kind of the tackles on Catch 22, and if anybody hasn't listened to it, please go out and listen to it because it's so interesting, is the onus that's going to be put on by the guy's wingspan. That whole inch difference between the 33 and the 32 is it. When you look at it so black and white like that, it sounds so crazy that could drop that guy. And do you really think that could drop him kind of into the next round just because of that kind of 1 inch of his wingspan?
Skoronski,
yes.
No.
Yeah.
He won't drop out of the first round. I do think it could cause him to drop out of the top 10, though. And there's 2 recent guys that I think are good comps for Skoronski. One of them is Rashawn Slater from the Chargers, who had 33-inch arms, which is a little bit below the NFL average. And he went somewhere in the teens. The guy that I really see Skoronski comping really well to, though, is Elijah Vera Tucker, who's drafted by the Jets at exactly 14th overall in the draft in 2021 when the Patriots took Mac Jones. So Skoronski is built more like a guard. He's this stocky 6'4", 6'5", shorter arms. Doesn't have necessarily that elite top end foot speed or athleticism, but he's so technically sound that I think that he's going to be able to play no matter where you put him, right? If it's at tackle, if it's at guard, he's just going to be an NFL offensive lineman for a decade. Like, you just can tell with that guy, that's what is going to end up happening. And you see some of the Patriots ties to him as well, not necessarily directly, but he's an NFL, blue blood football lineage in his family. His grandfather played for Vince Lombardi in the Packers. Like this guy is just one of those football lifers. Like he's just going to be in the league for forever. And whether he's a guard, whether he's a tackle, I know the Patriots need to look at that because their interior three is so set for next year that if they draft a guard in the first, he's not going to play. So you have to be able to put him at tackle for the time being. But if I'm any NFL team, I'm taking Skoronski. I'm putting him at left tackle day one of training camp. And then if he fails, then you move him inside eventually down the road. But year one, day one, I'm trying to play that guy at left tackle because I think his film is good enough to play there.
It's cool. We'll just get him some little arm extensions, like little finger extensions.
It's funny because there are, believe it or not, there are trainers or coaches or whatever you want to call it that work on these types of things with the prospects going into the combine. It's usually mostly hand size for quarterbacks. Like they'll stretch out your hands, but they teach guys how to measure, like how to measure with the absolute longest points of their arms and of their hands and all that. It's nuts. But I think the big difference is, I mentioned Slater. He had 33-inch arms. I think Elijah Vera Tucker was like 32 7/8. So like basically 33 inches. So if you're at that 33-inch threshold, like as long as you're in that range, I think you're fine. But some of the projections for Skoronski are that his arms are going to come in and like closer to 32 inches, which I think is going to be a concern for some teams.
See, I was thinking more of putting him on a rack and stretch it. But anyway, while Murph isn't kind of functioning 100% today, I'm going to take this opportunity. I'm going to take the opportunity while he's ill to just dive in and talk to you. Because as I said, I listened to Catch 22 and I've listened to you on Patriots Unfiltered. And so, yeah, I'm going to have to go into this department. There's a really good tight end class this year. And with Hunter on 1 year of his deal, but in all fairness, Evans talked about this a lot. And it's true. This isn't my enthusiasm for tight ends. This is serious. If I wasn't big into tight ends, this would still be a topic because for me, the Patriots have got a bit of a sneaky lacking when it comes to tight endage, particularly if they do sort of move away from Smith. But even if they don't, as I think Evan has said, there isn't much there. And you've got 1 year left of Hunter. But the guys that are worth getting in the draft are really projected as kind of first rounders, early second rounders. So do you think this really means that they're not, that it's a non-starter for the Patriots? And I'm just sort of looking at these projects that, are a bit, Are we going to end up with another like Dalton Keene, and I'm going to be super disappointed? What are you coming? Because I know that 14, everybody's complaining he's too high to take a tight end because they've got such significant needs, and I can't dispute this in any shape or form. However, you look at the tight end class as has already been said. And there's such talent there that it feels like a missed opportunity when really they do need to get somebody in-house who's of a talent.
In the first 4 rounds, I'll start with this. In the first 4 rounds of the draft, the Patriots should take a tight end.
Right.
Because this is such a good tight end class that this is the year to go after a tight end. Now, you're going to love a guy next year, Claire. His name is Brock Bowers for Georgia, and he's going to be a top 10 pick. Now, he's more Brock Bowers, not that he's in this draft, so I don't want to go on too long about him, but he's more in that Kelsey mold, right? He's like a hybrid tight end / wide receiver. In this draft, Michael Mayer from Notre Dame is your traditional hand in the dirt, in line tight end. Now, for the life of me, what I don't understand about this is for a fan base that watched Rob Gronkowski dominate the league for a decade. I don't understand why some fans, I should say, I don't understand why they don't understand that you can run your offense through the tight end. Like we saw it firsthand that the offense, if that's your best pass catcher, if that's your best path to adding a premier pass catching talent, an elite number 1 type of guy, then look at the Chiefs, look at the Baltimore Ravens, look at yourself for a decade with Rob Gronkowski. This is a path that's worth taking. That's a viable option. Now, with that being said, I think the concern that I have a little bit with Mayer is he doesn't jump off the film with you in terms of his receiving ability. It's good. He's got great ball skills. He's a savvy route runner. He's decent with the football in his hands after the catch, but he's not this explosive, either freight train or like a Kelsey type who's really quick and agile and things like that. He's a little bit more of a well-rounded piece than really somebody that's dominant in one phase. The guy that I can have consistently compared him to is Hawkinson, who I really like. I like TJ Hawkinson. But is TJ Hawkinson a difference maker? Is he a guy that's really moving the needle for the offense overall? I'm not sure. We'll find out at the combine. Mayer's going to work out, and we'll see. If he runs a 4.6, then I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to say, okay, this guy's got a little bit more speed than maybe we were thinking. But on film, he looks like a 4.7, 4.75 type of guy, which is about average for an NFL tight end. The couple of other guys I'll throw out. Dalton Kincaid, we all need to know his name. We need to know Dalton Kincaid's name. This is Travis Kelce, right? Like this is that type of tight end. I've heard, and I like the comp more because I hate comparing guys to Travis Kelce and Gronk because it's not fair.
Not fair.
No, it's not. Yeah.
So the guy that I would compare him to is Zach Ertz, right? That's the type of guy we're talking about here that can really run routes, get open, explosive in the open field. He's got that slithery yak ability about him where he just like kind of breaks tackles and you're sort of like, how is he still going? But he's somehow still going, that sort of thing. He's a really talented receiver. He's not going to give you anything as a blocker. Like you're not going to put his hand in the dirt and have him block like an extra tackle. But in terms of actual receiving ability, I could see a path for him to being an Ertz, a Mark Andrews, like that type of guy that's really obtainable. The last guy I'll mention, Darnell Washington from Georgia, is 6'7", 275 pounds, but he can move. And he can actually catch the football pretty well. He shows some pretty good ball control and ball skills down the field to contort his body and make catches and things like that. So he's an extra tackle. First and foremost, like he's an absolute dominant physical run blocker, but then he can also catch it a little bit. And a mid-round guy, Cameron Latu from Alabama, I think is somebody that they're going to be all over just because the Alabama ties. He's more of a savvy type of route runner, do it all type of tight end.
Joker kind of individual.
Yeah, he's not projected to be a great athlete. Like he's not going to test extremely well, I don't think, this week. But he makes some really great adjustments on the fly to his route running where he's not going to run into coverage. He's not going to, he understands how to get open at the top of the route. Like those types of things I think are really savvy about his game. And he's only been playing tight end. He was recruited to Alabama as a linebacker, an outside linebacker. And then he switched over to the tight end at Bama. So he's only been playing tight end for a couple of years, and he's already, in my opinion, one of the most high IQ players in this class at the position. So that's something that I think is really impressive as well about him.
But when you look at this draft, Easy, and you look at the Patriots' needs, can they afford to swing and miss in the first round on a tight end? I mean, how many tight ends have we seen pumped up and pumped up and pumped up into the first round, and then it doesn't work out? You don't get the value out of the pick.
It's a fair point. I think that's a position along with running back that's really starting to get devalued in the first round, not necessarily running back because of the misses, just because we know now from an analytical perspective that it doesn't really move the needle, right? And drafting a running back, they're a dime a dozen. At tight end, I think it's a really fair point. And I think that's my one reservation with Mayer is I don't know if he's generational in the passing game. And if you're not that in the passing game, then you're Hawkinson, right? I've heard some people compare him to like Jason Witten, which is a lofty comparison. Like that's an 11-time Pro Bowler. That's a guy that's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame. So I don't know if he's as good as Jason Witten, but if he is Jason Witten, then obviously you got an awesome player. But I just don't know if he's going to get there in the passing game. Like I said, I see more of like a Hawkinson, do it all type of, tight end. But the Patriots, I don't know if necessarily have that. I don't think Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, they both have their warts in different areas. Hunter Henry is a great receiver, but he's not such a great blocker. And Jonnu is a great blocker, but not such a great receiver. So I don't know if there's a guy on that depth chart that's as well-rounded as Mayer, but I don't know if Mayer is going to come in and teams are going to be like, how do we stop Michael Mayer? Like, this guy's just an unstoppable force in the passing game. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be in his future.
I have one question on that still before we move on, because I know that we've got a linebacker question that I wanted to kind of move on from as well. But quick question then. Okay, say they take a tackle in the first, because we kind of, that sort of is what needs to be done. If Mayer is still there early second, do you move up and get him? Your opinion.
I would, but I don't think he'll be there. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be there, unfortunately. But I think you look at some point on day 2, some of these tight ends, there's going to be a little bit of a run, right? Kincaid, I mentioned Washington. Some people really like Kraft, Laporta. Like there's other guys too in this class. You talk to people about this tight end class, and they say it's one of the best that they've seen in a long time. I almost forgot to mention Musgrave too from Oregon State.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this class is just absolutely loaded. So I would say that sometime in the second round, like I could definitely see in the 30s and 40s at some point, Kincaid, Musgrave, Washington, like these guys are going to start flying off the board at that position. And that's when you're going to have to pounce.
That was the other name I was going to throw out there is Musgrave. It's like, oh, hang on, there's one more. Okay, moving
up some speed. Yeah, he's good.
It's so difficult to see that they've got this, what's out there when it comes to tight ends. And yes, people make fun of me like Murph because it's like, oh, you're just interested in tight ends. But like you said, there is a significant need now. And as you mentioned, it could be the weapon doesn't have to be a wide receiver one. It needs to be a playmaker over a position. But anyway, we'll move on from tight ends because we've had a linebacker question, and I also have a linebacker question for you. So Joel asks, should the Patriots look at a middle linebacker in the draft?
It's not a great middle linebacker draft. It's the sweet spot for linebackers is going to be on day 2. It's not a first round position, especially at 14. The guy that I really like that I recently studied though is Drew Sanders. He's somebody that's 6'4". I think he's maybe going to be 6'4", 6'5", but he's like 235 pounds. So he's very athletic. He can really do a bunch of different things. He can rush. He can cover. He can play the run. He can do pretty much everything you would want in a modern day linebacker at that position. He's a little thin. Murph, he's not going to be somebody that's going to drop the hammer on anybody.
No, I like him. He's that high. I was talking about this with Dia Bate the other day.
Yeah.
He's that, we always talk about the hybrid safety that can play linebacker. I see this kid as the hybrid linebacker that can play safety.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, he's really versatile. And I think the one thing that they're going to really like about him is that he's got some really good film rushing the passer as an interior blitzer, or even as an edge rusher. So you can move him. They love those 3 locations for linebackers, right? The edge, in the end of the line, in line, like over the guard or center to blitz up the middle, and then obviously off the ball.
He started his career as an edge guy, didn't he, before he transferred?
And if you can play all 3 of those spots for the Patriots, that's pretty good value for them. The other guy I would mention is Jack Campbell from Iowa, who I think is just the best pure middle linebacker in this draft. Instincts, like all that type of things that are going to make guys 120 tackle guys in the leagues, right? Just instincts, savvy, speed, ability to move laterally and just mirror running backs into gaps. Like he's that prototypical middle linebacker that you read about. There's some love in there for Henry To'oTo'o too from Alabama, Noah Sewell. Like those guys I think are going to be solid day 2 prospects, but I don't think it's a round 1 position. There's not really one of those locks in round 1 this year.
What do you think of the Washington State kid? Oh God,
I didn't name. Too many
Henley. That's it.
Yeah, so I hear him get a lot of Fred Warner comps, right? Because he's a super athletic cover guy. And I love Fred Warner coming out. I'm not just saying that to toot my own horn, but I wish that they had taken Fred Warner in that draft. He's someone that is going to be a little bit undersized for them. We know that. Hopefully they come back and recognize we got to get a little bit faster there. And I think that they have, I think they tried with Mac Wilson and Raekwon McMillan to get a little bit lighter and a little bit faster. They obviously wanted Cameron McGrone to be a better player than he ended up being as well. So I think they recognize it to a degree, but I don't know how much they're going to jump all into a 225-pound linebacker. I think they're still going to want to be in that 240 to 250 range at the position.
Gotcha.
You mentioned Jack Campbell. That's the guy that I wanted to kind of ask you about specifically. My friend Chudders has been on at me about this guy. So before I really went all in on him, I wanted to ask your opinion. Then I heard on Catch 22 that you were kind of in on this guy. So it was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm getting the thumbs up from Evan on that respect. Where do you have him projected? I had a look on the PFF draft guide this morning and they've got him projected second, third. So just really wanted your opinion on sort of how far down do you think he's going to be sort of picked up? As in how realistic it is that the Patriots might pick him up. Is he going to be low enough that they've kind of gone through what they really, really need to be able to scoop him up?
So I don't think so because I think he's going to test a lot better than people think at the combine because you see a lot of his ability to change direction, especially in space, is actually pretty impressive. So I don't know how fast he's necessarily going to run in the 40, but if he does the agilities, I think he's going to do pretty well in those. And I think he'll do well in the jumps as well, just because he's an explosive guy. So I don't know if he'll be there, but I definitely think that he's somebody, like I said, he combines some pretty good agility in the open field from what I've seen with those linebacker-like instincts where he just kind of seems to be in the huddle for the opponent some of the time and just really takes over. I think he can be somebody that ends up a year from now, 2 years from now, we might look back at this linebacker class and say that Jack Campbell was the best linebacker in the draft. He's not as freaky as a Drew Sanders or a Trenton Simpson from Clemson. He's not as athletically freaky as those guys, but I think he's really got better instincts and better feel for the position, just a natural at that spot. So I think he's end of the second round, early third round type of guy. If he tests well, maybe he sneaks up even further. But that's another one of those positions that's low key on that list of the analytics driven teams are not going to take a middle linebacker too early. They're just not, they're going to look at that position and see how it's been phased out of the league and a little bit. And really, unless you're an absolutely great cover player at that spot, it's not a position that teams I don't think are going to prioritize that are analytically driven. So teams like the Eagles, the Chargers, like those teams are not going to even be sniffing linebackers until the third round.
But how close to generational is Brian Branch? And if he's there at 14, do you scoop him up?
I love Brian Branch. Yeah. His film against Kansas State was as good of any tape as I've watched this entire process. Now, that being said, he's working out with the corners at the combine. I don't love that. Like, I want him to play free safety for the Patriots. I want to move him back and have him play free safety and go through that conversion that Devin went through, right? And be somebody that can just really command the room back there. Because I think he's got that kind of ability. They played him in that that nickel role at Alabama at 190 pounds. I just don't think you can play that role in the NFL at 190 pounds. It's just a different animal. So I love his film, though. I think the two things that really stand out with him, his play speed is excellent. Like he's an absolute firecracker. And then you also see some really good instincts in coverage, too. He made an interception against Kansas State where I think he was freelancing. I actually hopefully maybe get to ask him about it this week. I think he was just freelancing, but he came off his guy and jumped a totally different receiver and picked off the pass. And I was just like, all right, that's what you want an impact safety to be able to do in coverage. So I think he's got first round, top 15, top 20 talent written all over him. I'm interested to hear from him why he's working out with the corners and why he's so convinced that he's a corner, though, because slot corner versus safety, I don't think that there's a big difference in terms of what he's going to make in the league.
Yeah, okay.
If he feels like he's an outside corner, then maybe there's a little bit of a pay bump for being a really good outside corner, as we know. I think the one guy that he sort of reminds me of, but I think he's better, is Dax Hill last year, who I really, really liked. I think both those guys need to play free safety. I think that's the position that they should be playing. So we'll see what Branch has to say about where he feels like his fit is. But I could see him coming here, Belichick getting his hands on him, saying, this is what you're going to do. Like, we know, like, I know what to do with, like, relax. Like, just go play over here and play this role, and you're going to be a Pro Bowler. Like, that's what we're going to have you do. And I think that is the right coach to get with him to a degree, like a Belichick who has that cachet to go up to him and be like, you're a safety. Like, embrace that you're going to be a great safety in this league, and don't worry so much about playing corner.
That's it. I'm trying to stay away from the offensive line because everybody keeps telling me that's the way I freaking go. But between Christian Gonzalez, I'm sorry, folks, the cough drop, and Devin Witherspoon, who are you higher on? Who do you think has the most upside?
So I'm higher on two different guys because
I'm
higher on I'm higher on them, but if I'm looking at it through a Patriots lens, then I like Christian Gonzalez, right? Because of the size. I think that's going to be important for them. Witherspoon, we'll see what he lists at 6 feet at Illinois, but I think he's smaller than that.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, I think he's probably like 5'10", 5'11". They tend to inflate those numbers a little bit. And if the guy's 5'10", then the college is going to list him at 6 feet just to give him a bump, right? So I remember coming out, N'Keal Harry at Arizona State was listed as 6'5". Right. And then he comes to the combine and he's 6'2.5". So I think there's going to be a little bit of a difference there. But I love Witherspoon all around, like just an absolutely competitive guy, just an animal out there, great cover skills. But I just love his tenacity. He makes some tackles on film where he's just coming all the way across the field and all out motor just all the time. But Gonzalez is the freaky 6'2", really, really good cover skills. Hips are really smooth. Feet are really good. Instincts and coverage are really good. Oregon played a lot of match zones, and he was great at peeling off of his guy and finding the threats in the zone and things like that. Really great instincts and awareness and coverage. So I think that he's somebody that can do a bunch of different things. If I'm picking for the Patriots, I take Gonzalez. If I'm just ranking the prospects based off of what my eyes tell me, I'm taking Witherspoon. So I think that's going to be a difficult thing for them. It is deciding how much are we going to prioritize size over just prioritizing the best player. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation for them in those rooms at corner is what do we do? You know, I was talking to somebody at the Shrine Bowl, and I mentioned Keitrell Clark from Louisville was having a great week in Vegas. And I mentioned him to this person, and I was like, oh, he seems like the Patriots type of player. And he said, you mean small? So they're very aware that they're small at corner. So I don't know if they're going to draft another 5'10" corner. I think they're going to look at somebody that's got some size.
There you go. A lot is being made that the Patriots need to up their game with the weapons. We've talked about tight ends here earlier. The running back room could get kind of thin this offseason. Can you see the Patriots grabbing a running back in the middle rounds? And why is it going to be Deuce Vaughn?
Yeah, Deuce Vaughn's the big one, right? Like that's the name everybody's got their mind on. Alex Barth used Darren Sproles as a comp for him, which I think is a decent one. I think that's the type of guy that he is. He's an absolute rocket ship, though. I mean, it's impressive to watch how quickly he gets up to speed. And he's obviously very, very quick, but he's 5'6", 160. He's like my size, right? So like, I don't know what that means in the league, but he's an absolute jitterbug out there. When he housed that run against Alabama, I was like, all right, this isn't just like K-State speed. Like this is real NFL breakaway speed. So I think he's got that ability. I'm not sleeping on Jamar Gibbs. I know that taking a running back early is going to drive people absolutely up a wall, but this isn't just a running back. Like this is a guy that can do absolutely everything. They lined him up at slot receiver. They lined him up in the backfield. And I just look at the way that Bill O'Brien used him last year at Alabama. And I was like, oh, Billy loves this kid.
You got to get him in 2, don't you?
I think you got to get him in the second at the latest. I think he might be a late first round guy, especially you look at some of the teams picking at the end of the first round that were are already basically finished products in terms of their rosters. Like that's a luxury type of pick, right? That's a pick that you make to that when you have, like the Patriots drafting Sony Michel in 2018, like when you already have all these pieces, you can go out and make a pick like that. He's somebody that I think really, I don't love the Alvin Kamara comps because he's not as big or as thick as Alvin Kamara is.
Right.
So I don't know who the exact comp is for him, but like I mentioned, just watching Bill O'Brien move him around the formation and basically do everything in his power to get this guy the football as much as possible in space, that tells you that when they get into that room, Bill O'Brien's going to say, look, I love this receiver. I love that tight end. But if we want a weapon that's going to change things, like Gibbs was our guy at Alabama, and he already knows the system. He already knows everything. So I wouldn't sleep on him necessarily. But Deuce Vaughn's going to be the middle round guy. There's some other guys. There's like Eric Gray. There's some other guys that fit that. I really like Travis Dye. He didn't practice in Vegas, but just talking to him from USC, he seems like a really bright kid that can get the passing game, understand the different nuances, which we know is important. So I think that there's going to be some guys there in that James White role if you want that type of back.
There you go.
We talk about different draft prospects and different kids coming into the system. Does the change at coaching give you confidence now that it's not going to be a waste? Who they draft isn't going to be a concern because they've got an offensive line coach, they've got an OC. Because initially, before this happened, we could be sitting here talking about draft prospects that could be, the complete cream of the crop that would come into a situation as Mac had last year that was just not going to get the best out of them. And I want to sort of use as an example Cole Strange. Now, I know that I'm using this loosely because obviously he's had, the talents that he does have has come out a little, but as an example of a guy that came out as a top draft pick that was put into kind of a coaching situation, not really there to get the best out of him. I mean, is your confidence a lot better now? Do you feel it makes any difference? And just on the back of that, what do you sort of see for Cole Strange for season 2, really?
Yeah, I'm definitely feel a lot more comfortable with where they're at offensively. I think it'd be hard not to be. You could say the same thing about Taekwon, right? I think Taekwon is going to be used the right way.
Good point.
With Bill O'Brien now too, which I think will make him a better football player. I'm not sure how good he's going to be. I don't know if he's going to break out in year 2 and all of a sudden be the missing piece that they've been looking for, but I think he's going to be a much more reliable, productive player in his second season than he was as a rookie. With Cole Strange, look, I hated the pick. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I still hate the pick. It still drives me nuts to this day that they did that, but they did it. So he's here. I think he's going to be a solid NFL guard. I think that there's potential to be better than solid if he can round out some of his pass protection and maybe a little bit of his balance. Like he tends to get a little bit over aggressive and lunge towards his engagement or towards the defender. And he's got to be, he has to play a little bit more under control, I guess is the best way to put it.
Right. Yeah.
For him to be able to get to where he needs to get to. It just was a horrible value. Like it was just a horrible value for where they picked him. And they created this hole at guard by messing around with Shaq Mason and Ted Karras in the offseason to the point where they had to take a guard almost early in the draft. And they end up taking a guy like that. And I don't know. It was a bummer from that perspective. But the coaching staff, I think, is going to be much better. I think what you really like too is both these guys are coming directly from the college game. So there's going to be some evaluation benefits, I think, from that as well, where they can go to Bill O'Brien and Adrian Clem and say to Bill O'Brien, either who is the playmaker that was just great for you at Bama that you want here, or they can say, who was the defender that you guys couldn't block or you couldn't, you had to know where he was. And I think the same thing for Adrian Clem. Like, who was the pass rusher that your line just couldn't block? Like Adrian Clem in Oregon last year, they played Georgia, right? So obviously Jalen Carter is going to be off the board, but a guy like Nolan Smith, who I think is going to be end of the first round, early second round edge rusher. Like, does he come up to them and say, Adrian Clem, say Nolan Smith, who had a great game against Oregon in the opener last year, is he just unstoppable. Like, is he somebody that we absolutely need? So I think there's going to be a lot of advantages from that perspective as well, that they can pick their brains and know from the college game, just being in it recently, who the good, really, really standout players were and who the guys that were tough to go up against. And I would also mention, just from a schematic perspective, like how great it is to have those two guys come from the college game and maybe drop in some new influence into the system in general, some, modernize it a little bit, bring it up to the 21st century, if you will. So I think there's going to be a ton of that as well.
What is the thing? Because I mean, obviously, when we talk about sort of when we discuss the mock drafts and what we think they're going to do, it's all speculation. Because obviously, until the night happens, nobody knows really, and it's Bill Belichick, so what the heck. But what is it that they can't do, Evan? What is that one thing that's possible, not kind of out there, but it's just that one thing that you're like, they just can't do that. We just can't go there this year. It's too important for XYZ. What's that one thing that you're just sort of dreading that they just don't do that sort of thing?
I think with the first pick in the draft, if they stay at 14, if they move down in Belichick fashion, whatever the case may be, they need to draft at a premium position. I think that's what drove me nuts about the draft last year, was that they took a guard. Like, you can't take guards, you can't take running backs, you can't take defensive tackles. Like, you can't take those positions in the first round this year. This has to be a tackle, hopefully a left tackle, but I'll take a right tackle, a corner, a receiver. Like, we're talking about guys that play those blue chip premium type of positions. And if you're going to go and take a guard again, or a running back, or a D tackle, or a middle linebacker, like those, we have to evolve in New England. Like, you have to evolve with the game and with what's going on around you. And those positions are not positions that other teams that are in it are prioritizing. Like, I don't think the San Francisco 49ers are going into any draft at any point in time and saying we need a guard. Like, that's our number one need, is guard. Like, nobody's doing that. Okay. This isn't 20 years ago. So we have to get a little bit more modern. We have to new age with our thinking and recognize, all right, we have to get a shutdown corner. We have to get our left tackle. That's going to be our left tackle for the next 5 to 10 years. We have to get our number one playmaker. Like, those are the types of things that these good teams are doing. And it drives me nuts. It does. It drives me nuts that we sit here year 4, I would say, of saying the Patriots still don't have a number one offensive weapon, when every team around the league has one, and some teams have 2. Some teams have 3. Like, the Niners have 3 of them, right? They have McCaffrey.
So greedy of them. So rude.
McCaffrey, Debo, and George Kittle. Brandon Ayuk's a pretty good player too. So they might have 4. All right. And the Patriots are still sitting here, and we're still talking about, since Rob Gronkowski retired and Julian Edelman started to slow down in 2018, we have been doing this since 2019. The Patriots don't have a number one guy. And at some point, the buck has to stop. At some point, they have to make a trade, or they have to take a big swing at the top of the draft on a receiver, and they have to put their chips in the middle of the table and say, this is our guy now, whether it's Hopkins or Judy or Higgins or a draft pick or whatever. They got to do it. At some point, they got to do it.
Yeah, but it's not like they haven't taken the swings. They've just missed.
They missed on the keel. Absolutely.
They missed on the keel. I think they missed in spending more money on tight ends than anybody in the league over the past 4 years.
You're tight endist, you are. You have issues.
No, I am not tight endist. It's just that if I'm paying somebody at the top of the league, I want them used and used in the right way. And the Patriots have not done that with your bookends, Claire. I know she's got little statues in the back of the 2 of them. And so it's not for, I think, for a lack of trying, but going along with your thinking is would it be smart to spend the cap money that the Patriots have on the offensive line, bringing in veterans, and then going to get these weapons in the draft, the cornerback in the draft, the wide receiver in the draft, things of the higher end people that are more of a dice roll to bring in here at the skill positions than they would be maybe drafting them.
So I think there are some really good right tackles in free agency that are going to be available, like McGlinchey. Caleb McGarry from Atlanta really had a breakout year last year, and he's one of those physical run blocking specimens. Jawan Taylor's a little bit of an underrated player from Jacksonville that can play at right tackle and be a plug and play guy for them. So I think those three guys are plug and play day one. We solve the problem at right tackle. Left tackle in free agency. I don't think Orlando Brown's going to meet free agency, and even still, he's going to get
tagged.
I have some reservations about giving him the bag anyway, just because those types of guys, when you're 360 and then you get paid that kind of money, spend a lot of time at Five Guys, right? Like they spend a lot of time just being fat and happy that they just got that $100 million contract.
Buffet? Where?
Right.
Where's the buffet?
I want to be a left tackle now.
So I think that's going to be something that I'd be a little bit wary of with Orlando Brown. But I think there's some really good right tackles in free agency. And maybe you take that right tackle in free agency, you give that guy a big bag of money. You have Trent Brown to play left tackle for another year. Maybe tackle gets bumped down to like a round 2 or 3 need, right? Where you can go ahead and maybe take a guy at the top of the draft at a different position. I would still, if I'm them, I'm still taking I'm trying to go and get one of those right tackles in free agency, and I'm still taking a left tackle at 14 if he's there.
Right.
I'm just fixing it. I'm just fixing the problem.
Fix the problem here, right now. We've got somebody that's going to be on the left side for 10 years. Brown can travel off to Vegas and hit every single buffet on the planet playing out there for Josh, and that'd be great. Go ahead, Claire.
Although he did tweet when we were out there one time that he hates Las Vegas and it doesn't want to be there anymore.
Okay.
So maybe Las Vegas isn't the spot for him. But they save like $10 million on the cap by cutting Trent Brown too, which I hate cutting guys. Like I don't like talking like that, but I think that there's a possibility that if they draft the left tackle, if they draft a guy like Skoronski, who they just know is going to play day one and they feel good about it, I think it's definitely a possibility. I'll be honest. I don't love the receivers in this draft.
No,
I don't love them. I really, really like Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable with it. But if he runs a 4.5, I'm not taking a 4.5 receiver in the first round. No. I'm just not doing it, especially with their history at the position. In order to take a receiver in the first round for me, if you're the New England Patriots, that guy has got to be as well-rounded and as perfect of a prospect as you could possibly get your hands on. I don't think you can just go and take a guy like JSN, who might be like a mid 4.5s guy at 14, and expect him to be this premier player. Jordan Addison also really concerns me for a couple of reasons too.
Where he plays.
Yeah, he played in that, at Pittsburgh he was better, but that was a lower level of competition. Then he goes to the Pac-12, and Lincoln Riley is just he's like the Kyle Shanahan of college football, right? He's just an absolute wizard. So he's getting him into space, he's getting him away from coverage, away from physicality, and just allowing him to run. And in the league, that doesn't necessarily always translate. Like you don't always have those reps where you're just wide open like you do in college. And Jordan Addison was one of those guys that just ate up space. Like he was just always running into space. I have concerns about that as well. So we'll see if they test. I assume Addison will test. I don't know if JSN's 100% yet from the injuries last year, that he might not until his pro day. But either way, once we get some numbers on those guys, I think maybe I could come around to it. But given their history at receiver, and given the fact that I don't think either one of those guys is a perfect prospect by any stretch of the imagination, I just have a really tough time with them taking a receiver at 14. If this was other drafts, like if this was the draft, where like CeeDee Lamb and Judy and those guys came out, I'd feel differently. If this was last year and they had an ability to get one of the other Ohio State receivers, I would have felt differently. But I don't know at 14 if either one of those guys, they have some real concerns in terms of their bustability. And if you're the Patriots, that's worrisome. That is like JSN. The guy that I always compare him to is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown's a great player. Is Amon-Ra St. Brown the 14th overall pick in the draft? I just don't think so. Addison, I don't know who I would compare him to. I know he gets a lot of Devontae Smith love. I don't know if I necessarily see it in terms of his ability to beat press coverage, but I think that there's some overlap there in their games. I'm trying to find a good comp for Addison because I haven't been able to come up with a great one yet because I don't like comparing him to Devontae Smith. I don't think that that's perfect. I do think that JSN, though, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Robert Woods, like those types of guys, I think is who he is. But those guys are not first-round picks. No. They're just not that type of athletic.
They're not that dynamic. They you know, it's not enough bang for that buck. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Claire.
It's interesting that this is a season or an upcoming season that not only the draft isn't sort of very depthful when it comes to wide receiver, but free agency as well isn't that much there when it comes to kind of talent and free agency. It's just that when you look at teams, this is another sort of that kind of ticks the box in regards to picking up a tight end is there aren't that many wide receivers of the sort of that higher up skill set this year. Why not take someone that's a playmaker, but he's just got a different 2 letters next to his name sort of thing. So that's another reason why I'm championing for a tight end.
Yeah.
I know that we're like butting up against the time now, Evan, and I just want to quickly move away from the draft just ever so slightly, just for one topic that's out there at the moment, because free agency is still something that we're kind of dipping our toe in probably after the combine.
Until it comes, right? I'm the same way. I love the draft, obviously, as you can probably tell. And so I'm full speed ahead on the draft, and then free agency just kind of creeps up on me, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh right, there's another way to get good players. Like I forgot about that.
There's a small pool that we just want to dip our toe into, and it's been flying around there, and I don't think I've seen your opinion on this. So if you have put your opinion out there, I apologize, I've missed it. No, but there's a name that's out there that everybody's kind of umming and ahhing about, and it's Jalen Ramsey. So what do you think in regards to him to the page? I'm not championing it, Murph, before you kind of give me all this crap. I'm just throwing out it's something that people are talking about, so I was interested to see.
I already have a fever, and you bring up Jalen Ramsey. Go ahead.
Well, there's two things I'll say about Jalen Ramsey. Number one, I remember we were having a conversation. It was probably in 2019 because that's when Stephon Gilmore really started feeling himself, right? And I think they were playing the Jaguars early in the year that year, and they were going down to Jacksonville. They lost the game in Jacksonville. Yep. It was like Jacksonville's Super Bowl because it was revenge for the 17 AFC Championship game, right? So I think it was it might have been 18. It was 18 or 19. And Gilmore said something along the lines of, he's asked like, where is Ramsey in like the top 5 corners? Like, where does he rank in the league? And he was like, well, he's a zone corner.
Yeah.
Right. Like, as in like, well, I play man, right? Like I get in, I cover people everywhere. Like I don't play cover.
I don't stick to the right side. You know,
right.
Yep.
So he came right after him and was like, we're talking about a zone corner now. And I was just like, that's great. So I think that there is some element of Ramsey's game that's true, that he is more of a zone-based cornerback than somebody that's a true man-to-man guy. But at the same time, he's a good player. Like I don't know if he's elite anymore, but he would be their best corner if they acquired him. There's no doubt about that. It reminds me a little bit of like a Revis type situation where if that deal that he wants, I'm sure, isn't there, he comes to New England, he knows Bill Belichick's going to make him look like a stud, and then he cashes out next offseason as an unrestricted free agent. Like maybe there's that angle to it, but I think that a team is going to blow the Rams away with an offer if he does become available just because he's Jalen Ramsey, right? Like just because you want to chase that name recognition as an organization. So I don't think the Patriots are going to be any sort of interested in winning any kind of bidding war for Jalen Ramsey.
So,
if he falls in their laps like Revis did in 14, great. But if we're talking about a true bidding war, I don't think that's ever going to happen for New England, especially because of his age. Belichick let Gilmore, let Revis, let Law, like all these guys, once they started to hit 30, that he was out. So I think that's going to be a big part of it too.
Yeah, completely. It's a topic that's going on. It's a hot topic. So I wanted to I wanted to go there. One quick thing from that.
I haven't talked about it much. No, it's okay. I haven't talked about it much yet because it just happened over the weekend, but I know we'll get plenty of emails and calls about it, I'm sure, about the Patriots going after Ramsey. But I think that if they go after a corner, we got to use Gilmore as the real jumping off point here.
Right.
Think of somebody that's maybe a little bit more under the radar that you wouldn't expect them to go after necessarily, that isn't the big name on the market. And then he ends up being a really good player, like a Jamal Dean, for example, from Tampa. Maybe that's the guy that is the Gilmore of this offseason for the Patriots if they want to go in that direction in free agency. I think that's the cool thing, though, about their cap space is that they have the cap space to make it so that once we get to the draft, their needs and their board is pretty streamlined. Like we're pretty much focused on one or two things because they can go out and they can fill some of these holes on March 13th. You know, I expect the Patriots name to come up on the first day of free agency like it did a couple of years ago. I think they are going to make a run at somebody, not only just because they can do it and they have the cap space and why not, but I also think the organization wants to make a splash. I think the organization wants to make some noise. I think there needs to be some buzz about this team.
You think Woody was on point yesterday when he mentioned that?
I do. Look, I'm not going to pretend to work with Mr. Kraft directly, but we work in the same building now, and I can tell you that the overall buzz and the interest in the team and the excitement about the team is a little bit. It's down. It's down, and it's been down since Brady left, but it's been down even more after last season. They need to make some sort of splash, and I think that they will. Now, I think that Bill will get to decide what that splash is. I don't think Robert's going to go into Bill's office and say, you need to trade for DeAndre Hopkins, but I think that there is a splash coming at some point in free agency, whether it's a corner or a receiver or a tackle or a little bit of a combination of all three of those things. Someone's coming here. You know, they're going to give a bag of money to somebody. It's just a matter of time.
There you go.
One thing that kind of, I know it puts you on the spot, Evan, and I'm really sorry, but if they took the cornerback this season, say Ramsey dropped in their lap, just for argument's sake, just to put it out there, and as you said, that maybe then he'd cash in next year, so they'd look at cornerbacks at the draft next year. Do you know of if there's a class of cornerbacks that are sort of similar to what they're looking at this year, next year? Would it be okay, well, we missed out on the draft this year, but we got, say, Ramsey for a year, for argument's sake, we're going to go and get the next guy then anyway? Do you know of anything, or is that a little bit too far in advance for you? Sorry?
No, it's a little bit too far, I think, just because like the fall season's going to change a lot of the rankings and things like that of what happens. But I think the main thing is with this draft is you can get a third or a fourth round guy at that position, and he might end up being a starter because of how deep it is at corner. So even if they go out, if they get a guy like Ramsey, who's truly like a 1-year thing, because they're not going to pay Ramsey. Like they're not going to pay Ramsey in the long term. So he's going to come here to reset his value in Belichick's system. If they do that, then I think that you will eventually see a corner in the third or the fourth round that has some developmental traits. You know, a big guy that's athletic. The one other thing I'll throw out there, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying it's going to happen, not this offseason, but next offseason. I would not be totally shocked if J.C. Jackson makes his way back to the Patriots.
Thank you.
I wouldn't be totally shocked. The Chargers gave him that contract. It was really like a 2-year deal with a 2.5 years, let's call it. They can walk away from it and not carry that much dead cap. I wouldn't be surprised that if it goes south next year for JC in Charger land as well, if he's released and if he comes back to the Patriots. He's already dropped some hints about it. I think a little bit on his social media that he kind of recognizes that Belichick got the most out of him and was able to use him properly and things like that. So look, I'm not saying that he's the answer, but I think that there's a world where he comes back eventually too.
Jonathan Jones and Myers, any shot that either of them are back here in a Patriots uniform next year, bud?
I think Jonathan Jones will be back.
Cool.
His market, for some reason, I don't think is going to take off as much as people maybe necessarily think, because I think the league knows he's truly a nickel. Like, he's a slot corner. He's not going to play on the outside for the rest of his career. So he's a slot. He'll move back inside. Like, PFF had a really, really low contract projection on him in free agency. I think it was something like 2 years, $10 million.
What?
Yeah, $5 million a year for Jonathan Jones. So I think he's going to get a little bit more than that, but I think it's going to be affordable to the point where they'll bring him back. Jacoby's a really fascinating case study to me because he's done everything right. He's developed as a UDFA. He's such a great locker room guy. He's extremely intelligent. He's a really well-spoken guy, like somebody that could truly be a captain and a leader for the organization. Like, checks all of those boxes, but you just are left wanting a little bit more out of your high volume guy. Like, if you're going to be the guy in the offense that has 120 targets and leads the team in targets and receptions, like, you just want a little bit more production out of that than what he gives you. So if that, like, giving him 16 million, 18 million, like Christian Kirk money, I just don't think that's the best use of that spot. If they were talking more about making him sort of like a 1B to a 1A, and he was like at that $10 to $12 million range, I could maybe think about it a little bit more. But if it's going to really get stupid for Jacoby Myers, you can't give him that contract if you're the Patriots.
336, 448. I'm in. Anything over with the numbers that they're talking about, I can't, because he moves the chains. He doesn't move the needle, and I can't get in on it. Go ahead, Claire. You take us on out. We kept Evan for an hour and 5 here.
This is it. We're literally holding Evan back from catching a plane. So please do go over to patriots.com, Patriots Unfiltered, and his Twitter handle's down there at Easy Nazar. Please go and check out everything that Evan does, because it's amazing. We have been One Patriots Place, brought to you by the E2G Sports Network. He's been Murphy. He's been Thomas Murphy even. I've been Claire Clazzy Clare Cooper. This has been the show. It has been great. Evan, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Have a safe trip. Fabulous time at Indy. We're super, super envious. But yeah, have a safe journey. Take care. Tune in next time, folks, and go Pats.
Always appreciate it, man.